What advice would you give me for my life?
That's a great question. I would say to always do your best, to be conscious of what's going on around you, and to do what you would love to do in life.
Tell me about one of your most prized possessions.
My most prized possessions are my grandchildren. I have 4 lovely granddaughters, and they are my most prized possessions. Pop and I were so proud to have our 4 daughters because we only had 2 sons.
Tell me about your first memory.
My first memory as a child? My goodness. My first memory is moving into our new house that we had just built in November of 1957. And when we moved in, we were so excited coming from the city to the country, and it was snowing, and we walked into the house, and my mom and dad had bought all new furniture, so we had never seen all the furniture. We had never seen the house completed. We used to come every weekend to watch it being built. But that was my first true memory of that I can remember. I was 7 at the time.
How did your parents meet?
How did my parents meet? My mother's best friend and my dad's best friend were engaged to each other, and they introduced themselves to each. I guess they introduced my mom and dad, and then later on they became my godparents.
How did you meet Pop?
Pop, that's a long story. How long do you have? Both Pop and I were working at Sears and Roebuck and Company in Middletown, New Jersey. I was in the infants department. I sold all children's clothing and baby clothes, and Pop was in the paint department. Ironically enough, we went to school together, but never knew each other in school. And this was my senior year in high school. And Pop came up for the paint department and introduced himself. And then he came to the house and knocked on the door and asked me to go out. So that's basically how we met. But for 3 years we went to school together but never knew each other. Pop was an athlete and played basketball and ran cross country, but I never went to any sports events, so I didn't know him in school. I knew of him, but I didn't know him. That's how we met.
Tell me about your wedding day.
My wedding day. Oh, it was a beautiful day. We got married on December 20th in New Jersey. We got married in the Buttonwood Manor, and the reception was downstairs, and the entire back of the restaurant was nothing but windows overlooking the lake. And everything was all frost and snow covered from the snow that we had had the week before. It was very exciting. We got married in a Catholic church, and we had our reception at the manor. And we had a wonderful time. It was really a beautiful day. And the next week, thank goodness we got married when we did. The next week there was a big snowstorm, so we would have never been able to get to the Buttonwood Manor had we had waited 1 week longer.
Tell me about the day Uncle Joe was born.
Oh, goodness. The day Uncle Joe was born, we were living in an apartment, and I was on a cleaning kick. I just wanted to clean everything, so I was scrubbing the floors and cleaning up all of the apartment, and I felt, I said, this is it. I think I'm in labor. And I was in labor, and I told Pop, I said, we need to go to the hospital because I think I'm in labor. This was like 10 hours after I started to feel like I was having contractions. So Pop gets up from the chair, goes into the bathroom, shaves, brushes teeth, showers, and I said, we need to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and Uncle Joe was born the next morning at 7:57 a.m., and he was born on his daddy's birthday. So both him and my husband shared the same birthday, and I think that was the best birthday present I ever gave Pop.
Where were you when President Kennedy was shot?
When John F. Kennedy was shot, I was in grammar school in the 8th grade, and the teacher got a call on the phones that are hooked up to the walls. This was a long time ago. The little phones were hooked up to the walls, and he got a call from the front office to say that President John F. Kennedy had been shot in Dallas, Texas. And so our teacher told us, and we were all in shock, couldn't believe that someone would actually take a shot and kill the president. The only president we ever knew that had been shot was way back in history, and that was Abraham Lincoln. But we never thought that would happen again. And I watched the funeral procession on our TV, because we couldn't go to the funeral in Washington, D.C., but the funeral procession was on TV, and I watched it at my next-door neighbor's house, because we were good friends. And we watched the whole procession for the whole day, and it was the saddest day I can remember.
Tell me about some of the places where you've been the happiest.
Oh, anywhere I usually go with Pop-Pop I was the happiest, but let's see. Disney World, England, Italy. Where was it? Oh, I guess back home in New Jersey when we used to do things at our house in New Jersey. And of course at our new house in Florida, those were the happiest times that we spent together.
Tell me about your favorite memory with Pop-Pop.
Gosh, my favorite memory with Pop-Pop. That's a lot of thinking right there. I can tell you about a funny memory with Pop-Pop. Okay. We were married in December of '69, and we weren't able to go on a honeymoon because his grandfather was in the hospital dying, so we postponed our honeymoon. So we never got on a honeymoon. So many, many years later, we were camping at Fort Wilderness in the Disney World in Florida. And Pop-Pop said, "Come on, I have a surprise for you." I said, "Okay." So we went over and he took me down to where they had the canoe rentals. And he had rented a canoe and was going to take me on my cruise, because I always said I really want to go on a cruise. So he put me in the canoe and he starts singing "O Sole Mio" to me while he's rowing the canoe in the wrong direction. All the other canoes were going the opposite way, which was the correct way, and Pop-Pop, a New York City boy who knew nothing about canoeing, was rowing in the opposite direction and didn't know how to row. We kept hitting the embankment because we didn't know to switch the paddles from one side to the other to keep the canoe balanced. So that was a funny memory.
Do you remember any fads from your youth?
Any fads from my youth? Well, a good fad was the hula hoop. Everybody had the hula hoop, and they all wanted to see how long you could hula hoop. I did pretty well at that. Fads were clothing fads. Okay, Madras plaid was in for the real collegiate style people in school, and then leather and high roll collars were for the what they call the greasers, or the really tough people, the real tough guys in school. Fads. I'm trying to think. Silly putty was a big one. We used to get silly putty, and we used to get the papers, take the silly putty and put it on the comic strips, and the comic strip would come off on the silly putty, and you'd be able to stretch it all out, and so that was a fun thing. But fads, there were so many fads growing up at that time. Skateboards didn't come out till later, but we used to build go-karts. My brother used to build go-karts, and we used to ride up and down the streets on these go-karts, so that was a fad. But music was a big thing. The Beatles had come out when I was a young teenager, so that was a big fad. We went all over the state getting their records, because you could only get records, the Beatles, in certain places. So my mother would drive us all the way down to South Jersey to this record shop to get a 45 record of one of the Beatles that we couldn't get anywhere else. So that was a big fad. There was a lot of things going on in the 60s that were quote-unquote fads, but it was a good time.